She realized something was wrong the moment he looked at her like she didn't belong. Not curious. Not interested. Not even annoyed. Just dismissive. Maya Lewis adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag against her shoulder as she stood just inside the entrance of the Meridian, a restaurant so elegant it felt like it judged people before they ever sat down. White tablecloths stretched across the room like freshly ironed sheets. Crystal glasses caught the warm light and scattered it like stars across polished silverware. Every detail whispered money, power, and exclusivity. And Maya knew, before anyone spoke, that she didn't look like she belonged there. She wasn't wearing a designer dress. Her shoes were clean but practical. Her blazer had seen better days. She'd come straight from a long shift at a community development office, where she spent her days fighting city permits, advocating for displaced families, and being told, politely, that her concerns were not a priority. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Just a dinner. Just a conversation. Just 20 minutes. Reservation? The maitre d' asked, his tone smooth but his eyes already scanning her from head to toe. Yes, Maya said, forcing her voice steady. For Daniel. The man hesitated, just a fraction too long, before nodding and gesturing toward a table near the window. There, he said. He's already arrived. Maya exhaled quietly and walked forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The man at the table didn't stand when she approached. He didn't smile either. He glanced up from his phone, his eyes flicking over her outfit, her face, her posture, and something hardened in his expression. You're late, he said. Maya blinked. I'm actually right on time. He checked his watch again anyway as if to prove a point. Traffic? Yes, she replied calmly. The city's always like this after 6. He gave a thin smile. Of course. That was her first clue. The second came when he didn't introduce himself. She took the seat across from him, folding her hands together on the table, feeling suddenly like she was on trial. His suit was impeccable, tailored, expensive, the kind of thing people wore when they wanted the world to take them seriously. His cufflinks caught the light when he moved, and Maya couldn't help noticing how effortlessly he seemed to belong in this place. So, he said, leaning back in his chair. You're Maya. Yes, she said. And you're? Daniel? He interrupted. Obviously. The word hung between them, sharp and unnecessary. Maya felt a familiar tightening in her chest. She had felt it before, countless times. In boardrooms. In city halls. In meetings where her ideas were acknowledged only after someone else repeated them louder. Still, she didn't rise to it. I'm glad we could meet, she said evenly. Your assistant said you wanted to discuss the redevelopment proposal for the East Side District. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's what she told you? Yes. He gave a soft laugh, shaking his head. Interesting. Something about that laugh made her uneasy. Before she could ask what he meant, the waiter arrived with menus, placing one in front of her with just a hint of reluctance, as if he expected her to order something she couldn't afford. Daniel didn't look at his menu. I'll have the usual, he said. The waiter nodded instantly. Of course, sir. Then the waiter turned to Maya. And for you? Maya glanced at the menu briefly, then met the waiter's eyes. Just water for now, please. The waiter nodded, though she caught the flicker of judgment there too. Daniel smirked. Water. Yes, Maya said. I had a long day. He leaned forward slightly. Let me guess. Nonprofit work? Maya's jaw tightened. Community development. Same thing, he said dismissively. Lots of passion. Not much impact. There it was. The assumption. The dismissal. The subtle superiority wrapped in politeness. Maya inhaled slowly. Actually, we've helped secure housing protections for over 300 families in the last year alone. Daniel waved a hand. Sure. But at the end of the day, the market decides. Maya looked at him carefully now. People's lives aren't commodities. Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's a very idealistic way of looking at things. She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she studied him, really studied him, and something began to click. He wasn't listening. He wasn't interested in her work. He wasn't interested in her at all. He had come here expecting someone else. Someone different. Someone easier to dismiss. So, she said, changing tactics. Why did you want to meet me, Daniel? He paused, then shrugged. My assistant thought it might be educational. Educational. Maya felt a strange calm wash over her. This wasn't a meeting. This was a performance. And she was being judged for not fitting the role he'd imagined. As he launched into a monologue about zoning laws, profit margins, and how sentimentality ruined good investments, Maya let her mind drift just enough to observe something interesting. Daniel wasn't nearly as important as he thought he was. His arguments were recycled. His confidence was borrowed. His certainty was brittle. And suddenly the tightness in her chest loosened. She checked the time discreetly. 19 minutes had passed. 19 minutes of being talked down to. 19 minutes of being underestimated. And then, like fate finally catching up, the universe intervened. A man approached their table, slightly out of breath, holding a folded coat over one arm. "Maya?" he asked. She looked up. He was tall, casually dressed, with kind eyes and a presence that immediately shifted the energy around them. "Yes," she said. "I'm so sorry I'm late," he said. Traffic was insane. "I'm Alex." Daniel froze. Slowly he turned in his chair. "What?" he said sharply. Alex frowned, confused. "I'm here to meet Maya Lewis." Silence fell over the table like a dropped glass. Maya looked from Alex, to Daniel, and then back again. And in that moment, clarity struck her like lightning. She hadn't been talking to her dinner companion. She hadn't been talking to her contact. She hadn't been talking to the man who requested the meeting. She had spent 20 minutes talking to the wrong man. Daniel stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I'm Daniel." Alex blinked. "Okay, but I'm the one who set the meeting." Maya leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face, not smug, not cruel, but deeply, profoundly satisfied. "Oh," she said softly. Daniel looked between them, his confidence cracking for the first time. "What is this?" Maya met his eyes, calm, composed, unbothered. "This," she said, "is the most accurate first impression I've had all day." She stood, extending her hand, not to Daniel but to Alex. Nice to finally meet the right person. And for the first time that evening she felt something powerful. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Justice, quietly, patiently taking its first breath. The wrong man realized too late who he had dismissed. Daniel's face changed in stages. First confusion. Then irritation. Then something dangerously close to panic. He straightened his jacket as if dignity could be ironed back into place. "This is a misunderstanding," he said sharply, his eyes locking on Alex. "I was invited here." Alex glanced at Maya, then back at Daniel. "I don't think so. I emailed Maya directly. We've been corresponding for weeks." Maya watched Daniel closely now, no longer feeling small, no longer feeling defensive. The shift inside her was subtle but absolute, like stepping out of a shadow she hadn't realized she was standing in. "Yes," she added calmly. "Alex is the one who reached out. You must be someone else with a reservation." The words were polite. The impact was devastating. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate being toyed with." Maya tilted her head slightly. "No one is toying with you. You simply assumed." Alex pulled out his chair. "Maya, please, sit. We have a lot to discuss." Daniel stared at the empty space where Maya had been seated, as if trying to understand how control had slipped through his fingers so quickly. "You're just going to ignore me?" he snapped. Maya finally looked at him fully, meeting his eyes without apology or hesitation. "I spent 20 minutes listening to you explain why people like me don't matter. I think we're even." That stung. Daniel scoffed, turning to Alex. "Do you know who I am?" Alex's expression didn't change. "I'm sure you'll tell me." The waiter returned with Maya's water, hesitating awkwardly as the tension thickened. Daniel waved him away irritably. "This is absurd," Daniel muttered. "I have a reputation." Maya smiled, not kindly but truthfully. "So do I." Daniel laughed, sharp and humorless. You work for a non-profit." Alex leaned forward slightly. "Actually, Maya doesn't." Daniel froze. "What?" Alex spoke calmly, deliberately. "She founded the East Side Coalition, the organization that stalled 3 major development projects last year, including the one my firm nearly invested in." Daniel's color drained. Maya folded her hands on the table. "We advocate for community-led development, transparent funding, ethical planning." Daniel swallowed. "You're that Maya Lewis?" She nodded once. "The same." Silence stretched. For the first time, Daniel truly looked at her. Not her clothes, not her posture, but her eyes. And what he saw there unsettled him. "You didn't say anything," he accused weakly. Maya shrugged. "You didn't ask." Alex stood. "Daniel, I think there's been enough confusion for one evening." Daniel bristled. "You're choosing her?" Alex didn't hesitate. I came here for her. That was the moment Daniel understood. He hadn't just misjudged a woman. He had dismissed the one person in the room who actually held power. I was just being honest, Daniel said, grasping for footing. This city needs growth. And it needs humanity, Maya replied. The difference is I don't believe one has to erase the other. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Nothing he said now would matter. Alex turned to Maya. Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere quieter? She nodded. I would. As they stood, Daniel stepped back instinctively, like someone who suddenly realized he'd been standing too close to a moving train. Maya paused, not out of obligation but clarity. For what it's worth, she said evenly, this city would benefit from you listening more than speaking. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. Maya didn't wait for a response. Outside, the night air felt cooler, lighter. The city hummed with its usual chaos, but something inside her had settled. I'm sorry about that, Alex said once they were a few steps away. She shook her head. Don't be. I needed to see it. See what? How quickly people reveal who they are when they think you don't matter. Alex studied her. And you handled it, gracefully. She smiled softly. I've had practice. They walked in silence for a moment before Alex spoke again. For what it's worth, the work you're doing, it's changing things. Quietly. But profoundly. Maya exhaled. That's all I ever wanted. Behind them, through the glass, Daniel remained frozen at the table, alone, surrounded by luxury, stripped of relevance. For the first time in years, Maya felt something unexpected bloom in her chest. Not vindication. Not revenge. Satisfaction. The past she never used as a weapon finally spoke for her. Daniel did not sleep that night. That realization came to him sometime after midnight, sitting alone in his penthouse apartment, city lights spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows like a reminder of everything he believed he controlled. He replayed the evening again and again. The way she had listened. The way she hadn't defended herself. The way she had stood up, not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. And worst of all, the way she had walked away. Daniel wasn't used to that. People didn't walk away from him. They waited. They negotiated. They tried to impress. He had built his career on being the one people needed, financially, politically, socially. And yet, with a few calm sentences, Maya Lewis had dismantled the illusion he'd been living inside. By morning, he convinced himself the encounter didn't matter. By afternoon, he knew that was a lie. Because Maya's name was everywhere. A city council live stream played in the background of his office while he pretended to read emails. A public hearing, packed, heated, emotional. Residents from the East Side District stood shoulder to shoulder, telling stories of displacement, of eviction notices taped to doors, of children forced to change schools 3 times in a year. And at the center of it all stood Maya. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't posturing. She was steady. She spoke about data and people in the same breath. About budgets and dignity like they were inseparable. She challenged council members without insulting them, corrected misinformation without humiliating anyone, and somehow, made room for empathy in a space built for power plays. Daniel watched, stunned. This was not the woman he had dismissed over water at dinner. This was someone who understood systems better than he ever had. She's good, one of his colleagues muttered as they passed the screen. Daniel didn't respond. Across the city, Maya ended the hearing exhausted but resolved. She stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, the weight of the day settling into her shoulders. Alex was waiting for her on the steps. You were incredible, he said quietly. She managed a tired smile. It's easier to fight when people show up. They did, Alex replied. Because of you. Maya didn't argue. She had learned long ago that deflecting credit didn't make her humble, it made her invisible. Instead, she breathed in, letting the city noise remind her why she kept going. As they walked, Alex hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you tell him? Alex said. At the restaurant. About who you are. Maya slowed her steps. Because I didn't need to. She met Alex's gaze. I've spent most of my life being underestimated. If I corrected everyone who got me wrong, I'd never get any real work done. Alex nodded slowly. Still, it couldn't have been easy. Maya looked ahead. It was easier than you think. She remembered being 17, standing in a guidance counselor's office, being told community college might be more realistic. She remembered working 3 jobs through university, sleeping in her car for 3 weeks when her landlord raised the rent without warning. She remembered every closed door, every polite rejection, every meeting where her voice was the quietest in the room. And she remembered deciding, at some point, that bitterness would never be her fuel. Meanwhile, Daniel made calls. Lots of them. He reached out to mutual contacts, city officials, developers. He framed his questions carefully, masking urgency behind curiosity. What's the deal with Maya Lewis? How much influence does she really have? Can she be persuaded? The answers unsettled him. She's incorruptible. She doesn't take shortcuts. She doesn't need your money. That last one bothered him the most, because money had always been his leverage. 2 days later, Daniel saw her again. This time it wasn't by accident. The city hosted a public-private forum on ethical redevelopment, a space Daniel usually dominated. When Maya walked onto the stage, the room shifted. Applause broke out, not thunderous but genuine. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. When the moderator introduced her, he noticed what they emphasized. Not her title, not her resume, but her impact. Maya spoke last, and she didn't mention him. Not once. Instead, she spoke about accountability, about collaboration, about growth that didn't erase history. Her voice carried without force, her presence commanding without aggression. Daniel waited for a jab. It never came, and somehow that hurt more. After the event, as people clustered around her, thanking her, shaking her hand, Daniel approached slowly. Maya, he said. She turned, recognition flickering across her face. Daniel. Her tone was neutral. No tension. No triumph. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. For the other night. She studied him for a long moment. Thank you. That's it? He asked, surprised. That's enough, she replied. Daniel hesitated. You could have embarrassed me. You didn't. Maya shrugged lightly. Public humiliation doesn't build anything lasting. He nodded, swallowing. I underestimated you. Yes, she said. You did. There was no anger in it. Just truth. As she turned away, Daniel realized something profound and uncomfortable. The power he'd spent years accumulating had never been real power at all. And Maya, without demanding recognition, had already reshaped the city he thought he owned. When power was finally measured by character, the shift didn't happen all at once. It never does. It began quietly, the way real change always does, through small moments that most people overlooked. Daniel noticed it first in meetings. Where once his voice had dominated the room, now it was met with pauses, clarifying questions, requests for transparency. People wanted data now, not promises. Community impact reports, ethical assessments, language Maya had normalized, language Daniel had dismissed. At first, he told himself it was coincidence. Then came the delays. Projects stalled, not because of protests but because committees wanted oversight. Investors asked about community approval. Boards questioned optics. One by one, doors that had always opened for him began to require something he wasn't used to providing. Accountability. Meanwhile, Maya's world moved just as steadily, only in the opposite direction. Community leaders called her not just for support but for guidance. Young organizers asked her how to stand firm without becoming hardened. Journalists requested interviews, not because she courted attention, but because she spoke clearly without theatrics. And she never mentioned Daniel. That silence became its own form of justice. One afternoon, Maya stood in a converted school gymnasium on the east side, surrounded by folding chairs and mismatched banners. Residents gathered to hear updates about a new housing initiative, one built with them, not around them. She spoke plainly. No one is saving anyone, she said. We're doing this together. Applause rippled through the room, not loud, not performative, but full. Alex watched from the back, something warm settling in his chest. He had worked with executives, politicians, philanthropists. But Maya was different. She didn't command loyalty. She earned trust. After the meeting, an elderly woman clasped Maya's hands tightly. They listened this time, she said, voice trembling. Because you were there. Maya smiled softly. They listened because you spoke. Across town, Daniel sat alone in his office, watching a news segment he hadn't expected to see. A redevelopment deal, his deal, had been shelved. The anchor's voice was neutral. The reason wasn't scandal or outrage. It was simple. The proposal lacked community approval and ethical transparency. Daniel turned off the screen. For the first time, he didn't feel angry. He felt exposed. Days later, fate placed them in the same room again, this time with witnesses. A public forum. A panel discussion on urban futures. Maya sat at one end of the table. Daniel at the other. The audience was full. When Daniel spoke, his words sounded rehearsed. Careful. Controlled. When Maya spoke, she spoke from experience. And the room responded. At one point, a young woman stood up from the audience. I just wanted to say, seeing someone like Maya up there, it makes me feel like maybe my voice matters too. Maya nodded, eyes soft. It does. Daniel felt something settle in his chest then. Not resentment. Regret. When the event ended, he approached her, not to reclaim status, not to argue, but to acknowledge. You changed the conversation, he said quietly. Maya met his gaze. No. I joined one that was already happening. He hesitated. I thought power was about influence. She considered that. It is. Just not the kind you're used to. Daniel exhaled. I was the wrong man that night. Maya smiled, not unkindly. You were. But, he added, you didn't treat me like an enemy. I don't need enemies, she replied. I need progress. That was the moment it fully landed. Instant karma hadn't come for Daniel as punishment. It came as education. And Maya, without raising her voice, without seeking revenge, had become the mirror he couldn't look away from. She was satisfied not because she won, but because she never lost herself. The city didn't change overnight. It never does. But something fundamental shifted, subtle at first, then undeniable. Policies began to include language Maya had fought for years to normalize. Community boards were no longer symbolic. They were mandatory. Development slowed, not because of resistance but because people were finally asking the right questions before moving forward. Who benefits? Who is displaced? Who decides? Maya watched it all unfold with cautious optimism. She didn't celebrate loudly. She didn't declare victory. She simply kept showing up, meeting after meeting, neighborhood after neighborhood, listening more than she spoke, guiding without dominating. And people noticed. One evening, months after the restaurant incident, Maya found herself back at the Meridian. This time she hadn't hesitated at the door. This time the maitre d' smiled immediately. Ms. Lewis, he said warmly. Your table is ready. Alex walked beside her, amused. Funny how familiarity changes tone. Maya smiled softly. Funny how clarity changes everything. They sat by the window, the same place where she'd once felt judged, small, unseen. Now the city lights felt like companions instead of spectators. You ever think about that night? Alex asked gently. She considered it. Sometimes. Any regrets? Maya shook her head. No. That moment taught me something important. What? That respect isn't something you demand. It's something you carry. People either rise to meet it, or reveal themselves. Across town, Daniel watched a press conference from his living room. A new redevelopment project was being announced. One he wasn't leading. Maya stood at the podium. Not alone. Surrounded by residents, organizers, city officials, people whose lives would actually be affected. Daniel listened as she spoke, not as the woman he'd dismissed, but as the leader she had always been. She didn't mention him. She didn't need to. He understood now. The night at the restaurant hadn't been his humiliation. It had been his warning. And Maya's satisfaction had never come from being proven right. It came from knowing she never compromised who she was, even when the world underestimated her. Later that evening, as Maya stepped outside into the cool night air, Alex stopped her. You know, he said, some people spend their lives chasing power. She looked at him, curious. And some, he continued, become powerful by choosing integrity over ego. Maya smiled. I was never interested in power. Alex nodded. That's why you have it. She looked out at the city, its flaws, its beauty, its endless motion, and felt something settle deep within her. Not because she had been vindicated. Not because the wrong man had been exposed. But because she had stayed true when it would have been easier to shrink, to explain herself, to fight fire with fire. She hadn't. And that was enough.